Hey everyone, Dan here, and welcome again to that Paintball channel. For this episode, we will be doing another marker review, this time of the Planet Eclipse Emek. Now, this is Planet's second mechanical offering based on the venerable Gamma core. And as you can imagine, while there are a lot of similarities in terms of performance between this and its big brother, the Gmek, there are a number of design philosophy differences that went into the making of this. So, not surprisingly, the Gmek is tailored more toward the higher end, more upscale, more luxury market. And this is geared more toward the rental market, newer players just getting into it. So, we're going to talk about some of the similarities. Again, performance is going to be basically identical. But we'll definitely spend a lot of time talking about some of the differences between the Emek and the Gmek and some of the thinking that went into that. So let's get started. Now imagine that you had a really nice supercar. Really good looking, really nice, really high performance. And you decided you're going to take it to a track. But then you start thinking, boy, I'm taking a risk with my nice car, right? Because I might bang it into somebody else's vehicle. I might bang it into a tree. I might bang it into a barrier or something. So imagine that you had a choice. You could take the super nice car that you like to drive around in town, be seen in, to the track, or you had a track dedicated vehicle. Same engine, same drivetrain, same gearing, same suspension. Everything was the same, except it was absolutely stripped down. No frills, no interior, no AC, no radio, no amenities, no nothing. Like the Millennium Falcon, may not look like much, but it's got it where it counts. And you could take that to the track instead. I'm going to submit that the Emek is kind of the track day version of the Gmek. Yes, the Gmek is very luxurious, really nice to look at, very refined. It's got a lot of nice creature comforts that the Emek doesn't have. But when you are thinking about strict performance, something like the rental market or the tournament scene, the Emek definitely is going to be a marker that you might want to look at. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the similarities before we get talking about the differences. Now, as you can imagine, because both of these use the Gamma core, performance is going to be essentially identical. It's going to have the same shot quality, same sound signature, assuming you're using the same barrel. It's going to have the same level of efficiency. Everything is going to be the same. But this brings us to some of the features that I meant to talk about last time, but didn't. And some other features that I noted last time, but maybe didn't unpack as fully as I might have. So the first has to do with the low force aspect of the bolt. Now, just for the record, the gold standard in terms of low force bolts is the AGD level 10. That thing is the best of the best. You can take, when they're properly set up, a rolled up dollar bill, put it in the breech, pull the trigger, the bolt will bounce off. That's as good as it gets. So everything else is racing for second. Now, sort of in the interim between this review and the GOG Enemy, I kind of went back and did a lot of close comparisons between the two, and this is substantially lower force. It's not as low force as the level 10, of course, but it's pretty low force, and this is on the lower end of the low force bolts, so very, very good. You pop your finger in there, no problems at all. It will easily pinch normal wreck paint, and it will also pinch fragile paint. But this also raises another issue with respect to an odd quirk of the engine. Now, as I noted way back in my first review of the Gmek, one of the things that I love about this system is that you cannot short stroke these. You pull the trigger, and for the most part, the cycle of the engine is completely disconnected from the trigger once you initiate the cycle. So you can, in normal use, you pull the trigger and the bolt goes forward, it comes back, and your trigger or your finger has nothing to do with it whatsoever. However, there's a situation where that's not the case. Now, In my last review, the updated review of the Gmek, I said at the time that there's a situation where you pull the trigger and the bolt stays forward. I apparently generated some controversy, so I am very much a supporter of evidence-based ideas, so I figured we would do a little demonstration. So I've got a squeegee, I put it in the breech, and I pull the trigger, and now we have, the bolt is forward, the trigger is being held back, and I can hold this all day long. Just hold it, hold it, hold it. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Bolt stays forward. So the bolt is forward and the trigger is back. Then, when I release the trigger, out comes the squeegee. So, to answer the question, as I said before, yes, when you pull the trigger and hold it, the bolt stays forward, so long as there is a breech obstruction. So, as I said, this is a kind of a weird fluke. I had initially imagined that when you pull the trigger, it would hit the obstruction maybe and just sort of bounce back. I wasn't sure what that would do. And as I said, in normal use, this isn't going to make any difference to you. It's a very gentle, really gentle. Not sure if I would stick my tongue in there, but it's quite gentle. You're not gonna break paint except under very rare circumstances. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about some of the differences. Not surprisingly, probably the biggest thing that people are going to notice has to do with the body. So we've gone from an aluminum body to composite. Now there's of course still an aluminum sleeve basically inside. You just need that for sealing purposes. But there's a reason for doing this, and the reason that is done is to save weight, save some cost, and to deal with renters. And one of the things that I always find to be interesting is that there's a kind of snobbery in paintball where people have this idea that aluminum is this ultimate superior thing, and if your marker isn't aluminum, why, it's no good. Okay, so some reality checks. For several reasons, this stuff, composite GRN, is way better. If you're playing any kind of serious, hard paintball, and you're taking dives and knocking into stuff, your marker's going to get banged up. And the thing with aluminum is it's anodized, and once you break through that anode, which is not hard to do, now you've got a permanent mar on the thing. Well, if you scratch, ding, bang up composite, nobody cares. It doesn't matter. First of all, it will actually be physically tougher. It will be much more difficult to hurt this than it will be aluminum. So right off the bat, that's an advantage. And if you do scratch or ding it, it's the same color all the way through. So if you want to buff something out, okay, you're building character, but you're not actually losing color in the process. And yeah, you can't ano it. It's kind of boring. It's basic. But if you don't care about anything except just strict performance, then that's not going to be a problem to you. But certainly from just the perspective of sheer toughness, composites are a vastly and demonstrably superior material versus aluminum. Okay, another thing that comes up has to do with the weight. Now I've got the weights written down here. This is one of the lightest markers that's ever been made. Now the Gmek is plenty light. The Gmek is 1 pound, 12.4 ounces, or 804 grams. The GOG Enemy is a little lighter than that, so it's 1 pound, 11.7 ounces, or 786 grams. The Emek is 1 pound, 10.5 ounces, or 751 grams. This is 2 ounces lighter than the Gmek, so that's pretty impressive. Another thing has to do with the weight distribution. This, in my opinion, has a little bit better weight distribution because, they've moved the regulator back to the frame, and that shifts the balance rearward, which is something that you want, because you basically have made the weight in the marker a little bit more efficient. The more weight you can center directly over the hand as opposed to having it hang out, the better. If you've got a lot of mass toward the front end, then it makes it a little less nimble. And you know, it's not much. We're not talking a huge difference, but it is a noticeable difference. And even if it's just a small amount, it does add up over time. So the reg that's in here, it's a Planet reg, so really good reg. And the adjustability, you know, very, very simple, not a big deal. I would have liked to see some markings on here so that you can tell which way you're going. Now, if you know Planet regs, it's not going to be an issue, and you know, the instructions make it crystal clear, but that is something that I would like to have seen, is, you know, very clear indication of plus, minus, but you know, not a big deal. Another difference has to do with the trigger. Now, they've gone with a pivot/hinge trigger on this one, and some people might prefer this to the slide trigger of the Gmek. That's entirely personal preference. Some people can shoot this a little bit faster. Some people can shoot a slide a little bit faster. Just pure preference. Another thing that has come up in terms of difference has to do with the safety. Now, I'll admit this is a very odd safety. So instead of your typical kind of pin that just goes through the frame, they've opted for this twist version. So, you know, you twist it one way, you can see S for safe. You twist it the other way, you've got F for fire. Now, some people don't like that. I personally, to me, it's not a big problem. People say that they've had a difficult time rotating this. I can easily move this with a single finger, not a problem. I can do this with my thumb, no big deal. So maybe, you know, your mileage might vary. And I think part of it is just working it in a little bit. But even out of the box, I didn't have any issues with it. And probably they do it just to be crystal clear. You know, sometimes, as I noted in the review of the Enemy, if it's not clearly marked, sometimes people will think that they've got it on safe and they don't. Doing it this way, and it's marked on both sides. So you've got kind of like a little arrow here that points to either F or S. So this probably is a little more user-friendly in terms of being absolutely sure where you're at. So not a huge deal. Another difference has to do with the back cap. Now, the Gmek's got the quick release. That's kind of nice. But this is very easy too. So this is very similar to the Enemy in that it just sort of unscrews. And this unscrews really quick. You don't have to turn it too many times before you get the engine out. And even though they've got an Allen key in the back that you could use, if you just don't really over crank it and you just do it hand tight, you can get this thing on and off with just your hands. And it's very quick and, you know, works very well. Now, another difference has to do with the ASA. As you can imagine, this is a non-on-off ASA. And, you know, as I've already said in previous videos, while it is nice to have an on-off, they're not necessary. You know, would it be a nice touch to have this with an on-off? Sure. But given that, you know, you're trying to get the most basic stripped-down version of this, this is perfectly serviceable. No problems whatsoever. Another difference has to do with the barrel. Now, these come, like the GOG Enemy, with relatively short, fairly unattractive, fairly loudly ported barrel. And yeah, they're definitely louder. Of course, it has a superb inner finish, and people kind of maybe make fun of the thing because it doesn't look good. But remember, it's geared toward renters. It's geared toward people who are just getting into this. You don't need some kind of fancy barrels. You already know what I think of barrels. Barrels are way overrated. If you want something that looks good, get an aftermarket barrel. You want something that's a little quieter, get an aftermarket barrel. You want something that's more efficient, get an aftermarket barrel. That's fine. That's not a problem. But there's no reason to make fun of a stock barrel that's designed to just get people out there on the field to have a good time. Now for this, you'll see I've got an aftermarket barrel on this. This is a lurker barrel, and I don't know if you can see, I think the lines on this just superbly go with the lines on the marker. I think that looks fantastic, and that's basically why I've got it on here. It's much more quiet than the factory. It looks good. Okay, bunker manipulation, whatever, you know, sue me. It's an aftermarket barrel. Another difference has to do with the grips themselves. Now, you'll note that there are no screws here. This is a toolless. You simply pull this out, and then you can just disassemble the pieces. That's kind of a nice touch. And I'll say up front, I don't like the designs that are cut into this. You know, these are deep channels. On the one hand, I'm thinking, you know, you're going to get a lot of paint in there. That's not good. But I think that's kind of the point. You want the paint to get in these grooves and not on your hands. And the traction on these grips is phenomenal. You know, this is almost like shoe rubber. And indeed, when you open the box, it smells like new shoes. You know, I love that smell. The grip is great. And another difference too is that these are much more slender. And this might be a decision-making thing if you're looking at this versus the Gmek. The Gmek grips are a little bit bigger. So if you've got bigger hands, you might prefer the Gmek. You know, it's a little bit thicker, a little bit, you know, wider if you're looking at it in profile. And for, you know, as I said, for people with big hands, you know, that might be more comfortable. These are definitely a little slimmer, a little lower profile. And also the actual geometry is slightly different on this. Even lining the two up, it's hard to tell, but the back portion is very similar, but the front is a little more vertical, and for some people that might be a little better in terms of ergonomics. Another thing that is the same that I think is worth noting is you've got this really nice lever locking. It's a composite feed neck, which you already know I think is a good idea. Better grip on the loader, but it's more flexible and it allows slippage to occur and it's not going to break. And so I really like that quite a bit. Okay, so bottom line, what's the verdict on this thing? In the last video reviewing the Gmek, I said that it was a direct competitor to the Emek, or maybe more properly, the Emek is designed to be a direct competitor to the Gmek. Now, is this a perfect marker? No, there's probably no perfect marker. You know, everybody's going to have different ideas about it. But in terms of the raw performance that you get with this, you know, this is 220 retail. The Gmek is $150, so you know you're talking $70 difference. You can get these on sale. I got this actually sub 200, brand new. And so people will make, I think, unfair comparisons. You know, they'll compare, you know, try to compare this to something like the CVO. Okay, the CVO is a really nice marker, and it has, without any arguments or debates, one of the best mechanical triggers ever made. I mean, that trigger is phenomenal, super good. But it's also an $800 marker. This is a $200 marker. And the CVO isn't designed to be in direct competition with this, and vice versa. However, the CVO is in direct competition with the Gmek. And in terms of raw performance, the CVO is not a better performer than the Gmek. It's certainly not more reliable. It's definitely not more efficient, and it certainly doesn't handle paint any better than the Gmek. But what's ironic is the fact that in terms of strict performance, this thing is on par with the Gmek, which is on par with the CVO. Now, you can argue, certainly, that it has a better trigger, and on the basis of that trigger, that you might get a little more speed. But bear in mind, the CVO is $800. This is a $200 marker. So yeah, the CVO has a better trigger. It does not have a $600 better trigger. And, you know, if it comes to competition, you know, mech tournament play, this is the one that's going to the field with me, not the CVO. Not because the CVO isn't capable, but tournaments are hard on equipment. And for that very reason, this is a marker that you can get out there and run full tilt and not worry about banging the thing up. You're not going to hurt this in the slightest little bit. I guarantee you, you run tournaments or even give to renters, this kind of a marker versus something like the CVO, yeah, this will hold up. And that tells me that's the kind of marker that you want to go into tournament play with. Something that will stand up to renter abuse, oh yeah, it'll stand up to tournament use. And I'll tell you this as well. This thing, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, measure for measure, is probably the best bang for the buck in paintball history, right here. For what you get in terms of the money that you are paying, this thing is unbelievable. I mean, it's almost, I almost don't even want to review this publicly for fear that Planet will say, oh, hey, wait a minute, we've been undercharging people for this. To imagine all of the performance of the Gmek. Yes, you don't have as many frills, you don't have as many luxury, comfort, quality of life features on this that you do with the Gmek, but to have that level of performance in a package like this, at this cost, this truly is a game changer. I'm just going to say it. I'm putting it out there. This marker is going to be the biggest selling marker that Planet has ever produced. There, I've just said it. I have said it. This will be Planet Eclipse's #1 of all time selling marker. You get one of these in your hands, you shoot it, and you think about performance, money, and it's bonkers what this is. This versus an enemy, oh, no comparison whatsoever. Lighter, equally fast, cannot short stroke it, way more efficient, way better build quality, equally robust. Yeah, no serious comparison in my point of view. Now, does that mean that the enemy is a bad marker? No, of course not. Enemy is a good marker. Nothing wrong with it. But I'm just saying that if you play mechanical, and I'm going to submit particularly if you play tournament mechanical, you actually owe it to yourself to check this out. Just check it out. Give it a shot. Just give it a spin and see what you think. But for my money, oh yeah, this, well done. Well done, Planet. And I'm just going to say, for the money, Rex Tyrannus. So, hope that was useful. Hope that was helpful. And as always, very much looking forward to the next episode. Hope you are as well. Come on back. Bring a friend.